2005 was a different time for comic book movies. There was some good stuff at this point, like Spider-Man 2, but also a whole lot of junk like Catwoman and Fantastic Four. I think the Boston Globe sums up the movie pretty well, but there was one DC movie tossed into the junk pile by critics that deserves a second look. Constantine is not your average comic book movie. Rather than sticking to a formula of quick thrills and one-liners, it dives into world building and creating this eerie, dreamlike atmosphere. In the film, John Constantine is a man hell-bent on hunting demons that are hidden in plain sight throughout the world. When the film was first released, critics seemed intent on making random comparisons to The Matrix, despite the movies having very few similarities other than the fact that they both star Keanu Reeves. And a lot of critics were offended by its depiction of the supernatural or just confused about the plot. But let me tell you, understanding this movie is a cakewalk compared to the TV show Supernatural. I think these critics' heads would explode if they watched that. This movie is blasphemous. Nah, these reviews are blasphemous. So what makes this movie better than the critics say? Well, for one thing, the tension and atmosphere that's built throughout this movie is way more powerful than almost any comic book movie I've ever seen. I mean, just look at the intro scene alone. We see a man drop his cigarette from a vehicle and walk towards a building. The camera initially shies away from showing his face, creating an air of mystery of who he is. Then, as he lights another cigarette, he is revealed, demon hunter John Constantine, played by a breathtaking Keanu Reeves.
You're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking!
A sense of dread is built as the camera slowly pans toward a door that he's approaching as he passes by people with fear all over their faces. Yet, Constantine himself looks far less concerned. He enters the room and we see a possessed woman strapped to the bed. As he begins his exorcism, we get our first taste of Constantine's personality and cynicism towards the supernatural when he says,
"This is Constantine, John Constantine, asshole."
A strong sense of visual flair is present throughout the rest of the scene. A demon's face is seen screeching inside a woman's neck. Its hand reaches out of an otherwise two-dimensional mirror. After Constantine finishes his exorcism, he simply leaves the room, seemingly disinterested in those he saved. This leads to what makes the character fascinating. It's not what he does, but why he does it. Early in the movie, the angel Gabriel, played by the always creepy Tilda Swinton, reveals that Constantine is destined to go to hell because of something he did a long time ago. I won't reveal too much because I don't want to spoil everything if you haven't seen it yet. The reason he didn't show a sense of caring to those he saved in the intro is because he wasn't doing it for them. Rather, he's been hunting demons in an attempt to buy his way into heaven. At this point, you notice how good Keanu's acting is in the movie. We all know he'd never have to worry about going to hell in real life. Constantine's damnation is a driving force in the movie, creating a race against the clock feel to help push the narrative forward as Constantine searches for a way to change his fate. Because of this fate, Constantine shows disdain for both sides of the supernatural and has a very cold, bitter personality.
They call it the balance. I call it hypocritical bullshit.
This helps establish him as an anti-hero, along with these guys. His moody attitude is grounded by his jokey sidekick, played by baby Shia Labeouf, who's a nice juxtaposition in personality. He doesn't have a lot of screen time though, which prevents him from becoming annoying like many comic relief support characters in these movies. Another supporting character is Angela, played by Rachel Weiss in a very underrated performance, who is an anchor for much of the film's narrative. The pitfall of most potential love interests in comic book movies is that they usually only serve as a plot device to further the character arc of the lead, which makes them boring characters in their own right. In Constantine, however, Angela is searching for the answers behind her sister's death, which is possibly the biggest driving force of the whole movie. Angela has the need to find justice for her sister, and John Constantine needs to avoid going to hell, so they both have their own compelling motivations for working together. This goes a long way in making her an individually interesting character. Her search to uncover the mystery of her sister's death also helps give the movie its noir thriller vibe. It's a slow burner detective story that builds mystery and tension before getting into the big action scenes. Many are made with a calculated number of action scenes and jokes that interrupt darker moments to hold moviegoers' interest. Constantine asks the viewer to first get invested in the characters and the world building. The lack of action compared to most comic book movies makes the moments where the fighting finally kicks in more rewarding and exciting. Towards the end, he shoots a bunch of demons with a gun that's shaped like a cross, and he basically becomes a prototype John Wick. Constantine is about an anti-hero becoming a hero, and how people should not be judged by individual acts, but by our growth and how we redeem ourselves. It's a type of film that wouldn't be made today, yet feels more significant within the very different era of comic book movies that we currently live in. It also has a flashing light rave scene that comes standard with every movie made in the late 90s to early 2000s. Keanu has been trying to get DC to make a sequel for a while, but apparently they don't want that to happen. Come on, DC, if you can make a Birds of Prey movie and a Peacemaker show, surely you can make a Constantine too. But with all that said, is Constantine a perfect movie? Well, there's a scene where Keanu gives the devil the finger, so yeah, pretty much. But why should you believe what I'm saying? Well, I put video essay in the title, so I have to know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, not unlike the critics, I'm just a guy that likes to talk about movies. Is Constantine a boring and forgettable movie from a lesser era in comic book cinema, or is it a misunderstood gem in a crowded genre that deserves more attention? Tell me your thoughts if you've seen the movie, or go check it out on HBO Max if you haven't. See ya!